Here's something that most men will never admit out loud. They've had a woman right in front of them, completely open, completely available, quietly signaling that she wanted something more and they missed it entirely. Not because they weren't paying attention, not because they didn't care, but because nobody ever taught them what to actually look for. And here's what makes that painful. It wasn't a mystery. It wasn't hidden. The signals were there. They were real. They were consistent. But most men have been conditioned to look for the wrong things, the obvious things, the things that only happen after a woman has already made peace with the fact that you probably won't understand her anyway. Think about that for a second. By the time a woman does something obvious, by the time she leans in and basically removes all ambiguity, she's already spent a significant amount of time wondering whether you were worth opening up to, whether you were safe, whether you were present enough to even notice. And if you missed the earlier signals, she's already adjusted, already recalibrated, already decided to keep a certain part of herself protected. This is what I want to talk about today. Not the surface level stuff you've already heard, not the "she touched your arm" or "she laughs at your jokes" content that floods every algorithm. I want to go deeper. I want to talk about the 3 signals that emerge before a woman makes any obvious move, the ones rooted in emotional psychology, in how human desire actually builds, in what happens internally when a woman begins to feel genuine pull towards someone. These aren't tricks. They're not hacks. They are psychological realities that have always existed that most people walk right past, and that a small group of emotionally intelligent men have learned to recognize quietly and respond to in a way that deepens connection rather than disrupts it. Stay with me. Because the 3rd signal in particular, it's one that almost nobody talks about. And when you understand it, it reframes almost every interaction you've ever had with a woman. Let me be clear about what this video is and what it isn't. This isn't about manipulation. It's not about reading signals so you can pounce at the right moment. That's a shallow and ultimately self-defeating way to approach human connection. What this is about is awareness, understanding, the ability to be present enough, emotionally literate enough, to recognize what's actually happening between 2 people, and to respond with the kind of grounded presence that allows something real to develop. Because here's the truth about attraction and intimacy that most content in this space completely glosses over. A woman doesn't become interested in you and then show you signals. It's more layered than that. She feels something, some quality in your presence, your manner, the way you hold space, and then her behavior begins to reflect that feeling, often before she's even fully conscious of it herself. What that means is that these signals aren't announcements. They're not performances. They're quiet emotional truths leaking through behavior. And if you know how to recognize them, you're not gaining some kind of tactical advantage. You're simply becoming a man who understands people better than most. That understanding, by the way, is itself attractive. Deeply attractive. Because emotional intelligence in a man is still rare enough to feel remarkable when a woman encounters it. I've spent years studying the psychology of attraction, attachment theory, the behavioral patterns that show up when desire begins to deepen. I've worked with men who were technically doing everything right but kept getting passed over. And I've worked with men who weren't especially tall, wealthy, or conventionally confident, but who had developed this quiet awareness, this ability to read the room at an emotional level, and who consistently built the kinds of connections that other men struggled to even get close to. The difference wasn't surface level. It was never surface level. It was this. So let me walk you through the 3 signals. And as I do, I want you to hold them up against your own experiences, because I think you'll start to remember moments where these were present, and maybe understand, for the first time, exactly what was happening. Before we get into the signals, we need to talk about why most men miss them entirely. And it starts with a fundamental misunderstanding about how emotional desire works in women. Most men have been taught either by culture, by the media, by other men, by their own trial and error, that attraction is primarily logical. That if you do the right things, say the right things, present the right image, The outcome follows in a relatively straight line. You demonstrate value. You make her laugh. You look a certain way. You project confidence. She becomes attracted. You move forward. It sounds reasonable. And in a surface level, short term context, some version of it even works. But intimacy, real intimacy, the kind where a woman genuinely wants to close the distance between herself and another person, doesn't follow that logic. Not even close. Because intimacy isn't a reward for good performance. It's a response to emotional safety, to being truly seen and not judged, to a quality of presence that allows a woman to stop managing how she appears and just be. And here's the uncomfortable reality. Most of the behaviors men adopt when they're trying to attract someone, the performance, the proving, the filling of silence, the over-explaining, the subtle desperation underneath the carefully curated calm, those behaviors do the opposite of what's needed. They create noise. They create pressure. And where there's pressure, there's no safety. And where there's no safety, desire stays guarded. You've probably felt this. You've had conversations where you were on, where you were performing well by any measurable standard, and yet something felt slightly off. There was a gap, a distance, and you couldn't figure out why. Meanwhile, you've also probably had moments that were completely unpressured. Maybe you were tired or distracted or just genuinely relaxed and something clicked. She got closer, emotionally. The conversation went somewhere real. And you weren't even trying. That wasn't an accident. That wasn't luck. That was the absence of performance creating the space for genuine connection. And it points to something important. The signals we're about to discuss, they don't appear because a woman has decided you've crossed some checklist threshold. They appear because something in your presence has created a particular emotional environment, and your ability to recognize what that looks like and to not disrupt it by getting in your own head is everything. So let's get into it. Sign 1. She begins to slow her rhythm around you. The first sign is one of the most overlooked, and it's because it's not dramatic. It doesn't look like anything obvious. You won't find it in a list of flirting moves anywhere. But it is profound. Once you understand it, you'll start noticing it everywhere. When a woman begins to feel genuine pull toward someone, not performed interest, not polite engagement, but actual internal draw, her pace changes around that person. She slows down. In a world where most social interactions run on a kind of social anxiety autopilot, where people keep moving, keep talking, keep doing something to avoid the vulnerability of stillness, she stops doing that around you. Or rather, she stops needing to. Think about how most casual social interactions feel. There's a rhythm of effort, of keeping things going, of making sure nobody feels awkward. People fill silences quickly. They transition topics before the current one has finished breathing. They stay in motion because motion feels safe. Now think about what it looks like when two people are genuinely absorbed in each other's presence. The silences don't feel like something to fix. The pacing is slower, easier. She's not thinking about the next thing she needs to say. She's actually here, in this moment. That shift from managed social pace to unhurried, absorbed presence is one of the earliest and most honest signals that something is building internally for her. Psychologically, this makes complete sense. When we're around people we're merely tolerating or performing for, our nervous system stays in a kind of low-grade alert. We're monitoring. We're managing. We're slightly on guard. When we're around someone who feels genuinely safe, someone whose presence creates calm rather than pressure, that alert system quiets. And when it quiets, the body follows. Everything slows. The breath deepens slightly. The eyes linger instead of scanning. The posture softens. This is not a conscious choice she's making. It's a physiological response to psychological safety. Now here's the part that most men get wrong. When they notice this, when they sense that something feels different, that the pace has changed, that she's more present, their instinct is to get excited, to lean in, to push into that space, to fill it with something, to capitalize on it. And that impulse, however understandable, disrupts exactly what created the moment in the first place. The reason she slowed down is because your presence felt non-demanding. The moment you become demanding, even subtly, even just through excited energy that subtly says, "Notice what's happening here, let's acknowledge this," the spell breaks. She re enters management mode. The pace picks back up. What the emotionally intelligent man does instead is recognize the slowing and meet it. He doesn't accelerate, he doesn't highlight it, he simply stays in it, lets it exist, trusts that the stillness is doing something valuable. And in doing so, he demonstrates something that almost no other man in her experience has demonstrated, that he is comfortable with the weight of a real moment, that he doesn't need to perform his way through it. That quality alone, the ability to be still without it becoming awkward, is deeply, quietly attractive. So watch for it. Not in a surveillance way, not with an agenda, but with genuine curiosity. Is she in less of a hurry when she's around you? Does she linger a little past the point where social protocol would typically move things along? Does she seem to find comfortable ground in silence rather than rushing to fill it? If so, something is building. Respect it. Don't rush toward it. Sign 2. She begins to test your edges, not to push you away, but to find out what's really there. This one should feel like a slight reframe. Challenge a commonly held belief here. The second sign is one that men consistently misread, and misreading it is one of the most reliable ways to undo something that had real potential. When a woman begins to feel genuine interest in someone, she almost inevitably reaches a point where she begins to push slightly. She says something that has a little edge to it. She challenges a statement you made. She contradicts you on something relatively minor. She might even pull back briefly, create a little distance, test whether the warmth between you survives a small amount of friction. And most men interpret this as a negative signal, as her losing interest, as something going wrong that needs to be course corrected. That interpretation is almost always backwards. Here's what's actually happening. A woman who feels nothing for you has no reason to test your edges. She's not invested enough. People don't probe the foundations of things they don't intend to occupy. But a woman who is beginning to feel genuine pull, who is starting to wonder whether this could become something, needs to know what's underneath the surface. She's been charming to look at from the outside. But what happens when there's friction? What happens when you're not being impressed or entertained or comfortable? What does this man do when things get slightly harder? She needs to find out, because intimacy requires that she go somewhere vulnerable, and she won't go there with someone who has never shown her what they're made of under even minor pressure. Think about what this means from an attachment and psychology standpoint. Human beings are wired to assess safety before opening up, and safety isn't assessed through smooth, easy interactions. Those can be performed by almost anyone. Safety is assessed through rupture and repair, through what happens when something small goes wrong or when someone is challenged and how they handle it. When she creates a small point of friction and you crumble when you immediately apologize, over-explain, second-guess yourself, or visibly need her to return to warmth, you've shown her something she can't unsee. You've shown her that your steadiness was conditional, that it depended on her approval. And that is not a foundation on which she can safely open. When she creates that same small friction and you remain even not defensive, not cold, not superior, just grounded, something inside her shifts. The test doesn't disappear, but you passed it. Not by performing calmness, not by being strategically non-reactive, but because you were genuinely comfortable in your own skin, comfortable enough that her momentary challenge didn't threaten your sense of who you are. That groundedness is what she was looking for. Now, there is a difference between being grounded and being dismissive, between holding your position and being unable to hear another perspective. A man who hears a challenge and simply refuses to engage, who retreats into performative aloofness, who weaponizes calmness as a way of communicating superiority, that's not groundedness. That's its own kind of insecurity wearing a different mask. What she's actually looking for is a man who can hold his center and remain genuinely open, who doesn't lose himself when pushed, but who also genuinely considers what's being said, who can say, calmly and without edge, "I hear you, I still see it differently," without that carrying any charge or need for her to agree. That combination, steady, open, non-needy, is extraordinarily rare. And when she finds it, the friction she created often accelerates the connection rather than damaging it. In real terms, this might look like her saying something that subtly contradicts what you believe, and waiting to see how you respond. It might look like her making a mildly provocative comment and watching your face. It might look like her going quieter than usual for a moment, not because she's disinterested, but because she's waiting to see if you'll be pulled toward anxious behavior by the uncertainty. In each of these moments, the answer is the same. Stay even. Stay curious. Don't perform calm, just be in yourself. Be interested in her perspective without being threatened by it. Be willing to disagree without needing it to become a negotiation. She's not trying to start a conflict. She's trying to find out whether you're real. Give her real. Sign 3. She begins to show you something she doesn't show most people. This is the one that matters most, and it's the one that almost nobody in this space talks about with any real depth. The first 2 signs tell you that something is building. This third sign tells you that it's real. That whatever has been developing between you has crossed a threshold that she's moved from interest into something more open, more specific, more hers. When a woman begins to want genuine intimacy with someone, not just physical closeness, but the kind of intimacy that feels like being known, she starts to let small, specific, unpolished parts of herself appear. Not the parts she typically presents to the world. Not the version of herself that's refined through social experience, that knows how to be charming and easy and appropriately engaging. The other parts. Maybe it's a particular worry she has that she doesn't usually voice because it makes her seem less pulled together. Maybe it's an opinion that she knows is slightly unpopular and that she typically keeps to herself to avoid friction. Maybe it's something from her past that she's still carrying, mentioned briefly, almost accidentally, in the middle of something else. Maybe it's something as small as being genuinely silly, not the performed, palatable kind of playful, but actually unguardedly ridiculous, and watching your face to see how you receive it. These moments are not accidents. Consciously or not, she is choosing to bring a piece of her actual self into the space between you. And she is watching, not with calculation, but with a vulnerability that is far more honest than anything else she's shown you, to see what you do with it. This is where most men fail, completely and without realizing it. They respond to the content. They address what she said, offer advice about the worry, debate the unpopular opinion, respond to the silliness with their own performance of silliness. They treat the disclosure as information to be processed. And in doing so, they miss what was actually being offered. What she was actually offering was herself, the act of disclosure, the vulnerability of being seen. The man who understands this doesn't rush past it to get to the content. He receives it. He sits with it. He communicates not necessarily with words, often more through the quality of his attention that what she just shared has landed, that he noticed, that he's still here, that it didn't make her smaller in his eyes. This is what emotional safety actually looks like in practice. Not the absence of challenge, not constant validation, not turning every disclosure into a therapy session, just presence. Just the willingness to let what she shares matter to you genuinely, not performatively, and to reflect that back without making it about you. Now, let's go a little deeper into the psychology here, because I think it reframes something important. In attachment research, there's a concept called secure base. It describes the experience of having someone in your life whose presence allows you to take emotional risks that you wouldn't take alone. When we feel that someone is genuinely attuned to us, not judging, not trying to fix, not half present while composing their response, we become capable of accessing parts of ourselves that we typically keep protected. A woman doesn't choose this consciously. Her nervous system chooses it. Something in your quality of attention tells her, at a level beneath thought, that this is a space where it's safe to be real. And the moment she experiences that, the moment she shares something unpolished and you receive it with calm, genuine presence, the intimacy that follows isn't a decision she's making. It's a natural consequence of emotional safety. This is why tactics don't work at this level. You can't tactically create a secure base. You can't perform attunement convincingly enough to fool someone's nervous system. This has to come from a place of genuine interest in who she actually is, not who she is in relation to you, not how she makes you feel, not what you want her to become, but who she actually is, in herself. Men who have that quality, men who are genuinely, quietly, sustainedly curious about the inner world of the person in front of them, don't need tactics. They create environments where this third signal appears naturally, repeatedly, and with increasing depth. And the irony is that this quality, genuine curiosity, real presence, the capacity to receive someone else's experience without needing to manage it, is developed not by studying women, but by doing the internal work of becoming more honest with yourself. The more clearly you can see your own inner world, the more capacity you have to see someone else's. Which is why the most emotionally intelligent men you've ever encountered probably weren't the most polished. They weren't the best performers, but they made you feel, in some quiet, hard-to-name way, like you could say something real and it would be okay. That is the quality she's feeling when she shows you something she doesn't show most people. And when it happens, when she brings that piece of herself into the space between you, the only thing you need to do is receive it well. Stay present. Don't rush to fix, advise, or relate it back to yourself. Let the silence after it have some weight. Let her know, through the quality of your attention, that what she shared mattered, because it did. And she needs to know you know that. So what does all of this actually look like in practice? Because I know the risk when you take psychological concepts and try to apply them to real situations. They can quickly become another layer of performance. Another set of things to monitor and execute while the actual conversation is happening in front of you. So let me offer something simpler. The common thread running through all three of these signs, the slowing of pace, the testing of your edges, the revealing of something private, is this. She is trying to find out if you're actually here. Not here in the physical sense, here in the way that matters, present, unhurried, interested in her for reasons that go beyond what she can do for you or how she makes you look. So the most powerful thing you can do when you recognize any of these signals isn't a technique. It's a quality of attention. When she slows down around you, slow down with her. Let the moment breathe. Resist the urge to fill it. When she pushes slightly, meet it without flinching and without getting rigid. Stay curious about her perspective. Disagree where you actually disagree, without apology and without edge. Trust that her respect for you grows in those moments of quiet groundedness, not in the moments where you perform being unbothered. When she shows you something private, receive it like it matters because it does. Ask a genuine follow-up question not to demonstrate engagement, but because you actually want to understand more. Let the silence after a disclosure be soft, not empty. The goal isn't to solve or impress. The goal is to make her feel that she arrived in safe territory when she chose to share that with you. And underneath all of this, the foundation that makes all of this possible is your own sense of self, your comfort with who you are, your willingness to be present with another person without needing that interaction to produce a specific outcome. That's not something you manufacture. That's something you develop, slowly, honestly, through the ongoing process of knowing yourself better, understanding your own patterns, your own fears, your own ways of seeking approval or managing vulnerability, and gradually becoming a man whose presence doesn't require management because it comes from a real place. That, more than anything else, is what creates the environment in which these three signs appear. A few things worth remembering as you move through interactions with this new awareness. You don't need to narrate what you're noticing. If you sense that she's slowed down, you don't mention it. If you sense she's testing you, you don't comment on the test. If she shares something private, you don't say, "Thank you for trusting me with that," in a way that calls attention to the dynamic. You just receive it. The acknowledgement happens through presence, not through words. Also, and this is important, these signals are not a green light to push toward a specific outcome. They're an invitation to continue going deeper. The man who recognizes these signs and thinks, okay, now I can make my move, has fundamentally misunderstood what's being offered. What's being offered is the possibility of real connection. The way to honor it is to stay in it, patient, present, genuinely interested, not to leverage it. The depth of what develops between two people is almost always directly proportional to how long both people were willing to stay in the honest, unscripted, unpressured space of actually getting to know each other. Don't shortcut it. If what we've talked about today resonates with you, if you find yourself in a place where you understand the ideas, but you're not sure how to actually embody them, how to build the kind of presence and self-awareness that makes this feel natural rather than effortful, I want to point you towards something. I've put together a guide specifically for men who are in this middle ground, who have moved past the basic how to attract women content, who can see that something deeper is required, but who are still figuring out what that actually means in practice. What it means to develop emotional intelligence, genuine presence, and the kind of grounded confidence that isn't dependent on other people's responses. The guide is free. You'll find the link in the description below. There's no pitch inside it, no upsell, just a structured framework for working on the qualities that actually matter, the inner ones, the ones that show up in your presence before you've said a single word. Take it or leave it. It's there if it's useful. Let me close with this. Everything we talked about today, the slowing of rhythm, the testing of edges, the revealing of something private, these aren't formulas. They're not a system to be applied. They are a window into the interior life of another person, into how desire actually builds, how trust actually develops, how intimacy actually becomes possible between two people who start as strangers. And the thing that allows you to see through that window, to notice these signals and respond to them in a way that deepens rather than disrupts, it's not knowledge. It's not confidence in the way that word usually gets used. It's not charm or looks or social calibration. It's presence. It's emotional honesty. It's the willingness to be actually interested in another human being for who they are, to hold steady when things get slightly uncomfortable, and to receive what someone shares with you as though it matters. Because it does. The men who build the most meaningful connections with women aren't the ones who figured out the right move. They're the ones who became real enough, grounded enough, present enough, that real women could show up around them. That's the work. And it's genuinely worth doing, not just for what it creates between you and someone else, but for what it creates in you. Because a man who can be fully present, who can hold his ground without becoming defensive, who can receive another person's inner world with genuine care, that man lives differently in every area of his life, not just with women. So if you take one thing from this video, let it be this. Stop trying to read signals so you can act on them. Start developing the quality of presence that makes those signals appear naturally, because she feels safe enough, seen enough to let them. The rest follows from there. It always has. If something in this landed for you, drop it in the comments. I read them. I respond to them. And sometimes the things you share shape what we explore next. If you're new here and this felt different from what you usually find welcome, subscribe if you want more of it. And take care of yourself out there.